All right, ladies and gentlemen, the second session for the day is on a very interesting topic, and that will be presented by Mr. Mark Rayner, who's the head of partnerships for Symphony AI Sensa-NetReveal. And the topic of discussion is from rule-based to AI, achieving effectiveness and efficiency through your transaction monitoring network. So, to quickly introduce Mark, he comes with 19 years of experience in the financial service, spanning AML compliance, AI and machine learning, and cybersecurity. As the head of partnerships at Symphony AI Sensa-NetReveal, Mark works with financial institutions and trusted third parties across the EMEA region to maximize the effectiveness and efficiency of AML programs. Prior to this, Mark managed the consulting business for Base Systems Digital Intelligence, helping leading banks transform their operations and mitigate cyber threats. Mark is also a CAMS certified gentleman. All right, Mark, from the team at IGR, we welcome you to the MENA AML and Fraud Conference. I leave the stage for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anil. And good morning to everybody. And thank you to the panel for a really interesting discussion there. I really loved the idea of turning everything on its head and thinking about how consumers give loans to banks and therefore the trust that we put in those institutions. So as Anil was saying, I'm Mark Rayner and I lead the partnership program at Symphony AI Sensa-NetReveal. In this presentation, I'm going to be sharing some thoughts on how AI can transform the effectiveness and efficiency of transaction monitoring, particularly focused on the case for change, and why we believe a hybrid approach is urgently needed to turn the tide against money laundering. And we've just heard some of the real impacts that money laundering has on both consumers, institutions, and society in general. And transaction monitoring plays a critical role in protecting us all from money laundering. I'll also cover some major use cases and how to overcome challenges in operationalizing AI. This is very much a presentation focused on how to drive real-world benefit from these techniques. It's a very rapidly evolving space. I suspect everybody may have seen a lot of noise around ChatGPT and generative AI. I'll come on to that in a second, but it's very rapidly evolving. And I think there is a huge opportunity to actually start to operationalize some of these techniques and drive real world benefit. To that topic, I'll also cover some real world results from a recent project. And I'll also talk a little bit about where we're going next with generative AI and those large language models that I've just mentioned. So I'd like to start by giving you a quick overview of Symphony AI and why we're so excited about the potential for artificial intelligence in transaction monitoring and AML more broadly. So Symphony AI is one of the world's leading AI companies, and our vision is to transform the enterprise with AI and build the future of work. By combining deep vertical expertise in our markets with advanced technology, we really do deliver rapid value to our customers through operational efficiencies and AI-driven recommendations. Sensa-NetReveal is our financial crime prevention division with a portfolio of solutions for transaction monitoring, customer due diligence, sanctions and PEP screening, fraud and case management. We have 20 years of experience in AML, and we combine that with AI technology that's designed to meet specific requirements for AML teams. We're lucky enough to be trusted by more than a third of the top 100 global banks, and we work with institutions across EMEA, North America, and APAC. Given the ever-increasing quantity and complexity and speed of transactions, and we heard about some of that in the previous panel, transaction monitoring is becoming an even more critical defense against money laundering. And we believe that there's a transformational opportunity right now to leverage these technologies and fight financial crime more effectively. Before we delve into the use cases, though, it's important to recognize that it's not an either-or decision when deciding between rules and artificial intelligence. Rules have enabled us to codify years of expertise in financial crime risks and help create a standardized framework for identifying suspicious transactions. They're also inherently explainable, enabling investigators to understand why an alert has been raised, and for auditors to trace the logic behind decisions. And finally, rule-based systems have helped to meet compliance requirements by aligning transaction monitoring systems with specific requirements and thresholds mandated by regulators. However, a purely rule-based approach does suffer from limitations, and some of those are shown in orange at the bottom. So most notably, an inability to detect novel and evolving patterns of financial crime. There can be high false positive rates, and they obviously have a high operational cost associated with managing those. And thirdly, the difficulty in managing and maintaining an increasingly complex set of rules. So in this context, it's perhaps no surprise that there is significant room for improvement. The UN ODC estimates that 2 to 5% of global GDP is laundered annually. And industry experts put the cost of compliance at 100 times more than the funds that are recovered. Perhaps most concerningly of all, though, is that the Basel AML Index found that the effectiveness of AML and CFT measures across all of the countries assessed by FATF was only 30% in 2021, and it actually fell to 29% in 2022. So given the importance of transaction monitoring within the overall AML framework, it's clear that significant improvements are required in how we identify suspicious behavior if we're going to make some material changes to these metrics. So looking across the end-to-end transaction monitoring process, there are 4 main use cases for AI. The first, rule tuning, is a perfect example of how AI could be used to augment a rule-based approach and ensure that the output from rules is as robust as possible. Genetic algorithms, as you can see on the bottom, can be used to optimize parameters by iterating through individual solutions to simulate the impact of changes, and then using a natural selection process to identify the optimal set of thresholds. At the risk detection stage, there's a range of machine learning models that we could use to build up a holistic risk score for each entity. Now, these include supervised models, such as risk similarity, which considers if an entity is behaving like a bad actor based on previous investigations, and is therefore able to detect much more nuanced behavior than traditional Boolean logic can. But it also includes unsupervised models, things like change in behavior scores and anomaly detection, which can be used to identify outliers and anomalies by segmenting and clustering data. That's critical in detecting novel risks that have not been seen before. Once the detection models have been executed, the alerts themselves can then be risk scored and presented to investigators in a priority order with the option to hibernate the low risk alerts. That can drive significant improvements in investigator efficiency, and hibernating rather than closing those low risk alerts means that they can be revisited in the future if the risk changes. And finally, generative AI and large language models can be applied in the case management layer. Now, this acts as a digital assistant for the investigator to understand why certain alerts have been raised. You can collate key information and prepare case summaries and SAR narratives, and I'll come back to that a little bit later. Now, although AI can drive significant benefits, operationalizing it within a highly regulated space like financial services and AML requires a mature set of capabilities, and there's 4 that I call out on this slide. Interpretability and transparency is a key requirement, both from an investigator perspective, but also from auditors and regulators. And local explainability models help to identify the key features that led to detection being raised. And that could be something as specific as the average value of domestic credits over the last 3 months. And they can be presented visually to show the aggravating features in red and the mitigating features in green, so that the investigator can then make their own decision on whether to progress the alert or not. On the right, model performance can drift over time. Dashboards enable AML teams to monitor the performance of key metrics, things like false positives and true positive rates. And capabilities like model ops can be used to automate the retuning of models. Although it's important that investigators are periodically presented with the lower risk alerts so that you can get the validation of model recommendations, and it's not just becoming an echo chamber. At the bottom left, supervised models depend on labels, which are often taken from the outcome of previous investigations, and they can suffer from data quality errors and bias. And we found that impact can be mitigated by combining a range of supervised and unsupervised techniques, such as clustering and segmentation, and then deriving that holistic risk score that I talked about earlier. And finally, model governance is critical to ensure that there's confidence in the data that feeds into the model training and testing processes, the code that actually gets promoted into production, and the history of changes over time. And what you see on the screen there is a simple snapshot of some of our auditing capability to show the different modeling executions, the data sets that were used, and what the experiment was for. So what does this look like in practice? To answer that, I'd like to share some results from a tier 1 retail bank we worked with, who were suffering from high volumes of false positives in their transaction monitoring solution. Now, as well as reducing the false positive burden, this customer wanted to ensure that they weren't exposed to any hidden risk that the rules weren't catching. Starting with one country, and importantly, the same data as a legacy transaction monitoring system, we trained machine learning models based on the SARs that had been previously raised. And these models were able to reduce the number of false positives by 77%, while still capturing every single true positive. So that's where the customer had previously investigated and raised a SAR. Now, in addition, the combination of supervised and unsupervised machine learning identified a 263% more suspicious activity than the rule-based approach. So all of those additional alerts were investigated and validated by the customer, and that led to further SARs being filed that the bank simply wasn't aware of before. Taken together, these results meant that we achieved an 81 times improvement in the risk to alert ratio. So that means a significantly smaller number of alerts and the lower costs associated with that, but also, and perhaps more importantly, a much higher proportion of productive alerts. Now, these results are so compelling that the customers decided to roll the solution out across their other countries, and we're currently in the process of supporting them with that. I'd now like to turn to generative AI, which represents the next frontier in artificial intelligence, and I said this was a very rapidly developing space. So unlike traditional AI models, and it's almost funny to use the word traditional AI models that focus on classification, prediction, or optimization, generative AI uses large language models and deep learning to understand the patterns and structures in existing data and use that knowledge to create new data and content. Now, that inevitably throws up new risks in terms of, for example, bias or misuse, ethical concerns, and unintended consequences. However, generative AI also has the potential to unlock new levels of productivity, efficiency, and growth. And you can see some of the benefits, more specific benefits on the right-hand side. Now, we're no strangers to navigating the negative and positive impacts of technology and innovation. And as such, we believe it's incumbent on us collectively to work through individual use cases, to understand the benefits, identify the risks, but also to put appropriate guardrails in place. Because let's face it, transaction monitoring urgently needs a significant step change. Now, from a transaction monitoring perspective, we've recently announced our Sensa CoPilot, which is a digital assistant that uses generative AI to source, summarize, and analyze data, freeing up financial crime investigators to focus on what they should be doing, stopping the bad guys. It's still very early days for this innovation, but we estimate that this could accelerate investigations by up to 70%. But it could also improve the consistency of that process across large institutions, as well as make it more intuitive for investigators And this is that future of work that I was referring to in the introduction. So I'd now like to show you a quick overview of Sensa CoPilot and hopefully give you an idea of the power of generative AI. And in this example, we'll start as a level 1 investigator and go into a new alert that's just been raised. So as you can see, CoPilot sits alongside the investigation screen and immediately provides a quick summary for why the alert has been raised. Now, in this case, the alert was triggered due to an international wire, which is considered unusual, and the investigator can ask CoPilot for additional information about that activity. After a few seconds, CoPilot returns the details in the international wire, and we can see that the beneficiary country is China, which it considers unusual. So the investigator decides to move this forward to L2. That's sufficient. They classify to the risk, add a note, and confirm the decision. Now we can now jump into level 2 queue, where the investigator is able to review the case summary that CoPilot provided previously and perform a more in-depth investigation. The investigator goes to the web search, and CoPilot returns several results classified as high or low relevance based on a classification model that's been trained on financial crime data. The investigator saves those results and asks CoPilot to summarize them together. CoPilot returns a natural language synopsis for both articles, and the investigator adds that to the narrative as well. We can then move into the transaction history, and the investigator asks for details of the cash deposits over the last 6 months. And CoPilot returns details of 2 transactions for 14,000 Canadian dollars, which are shown on the left for convenience. The investigator then asks CoPilot for details of other suspicious activity, and it identifies repetitive, large value payments to different beneficiaries. At this stage, the investigator decides to raise a SAR and asks CoPilot to generate the narrative. And this is what you can see it doing on screen right now. Now, based on the industry feedback we've had, we save a huge amount of time actually drafting the SARs, but also significantly improve the consistency of the SAR narrative across institutions and ensuring they adhere to a common structure and style. Now, in this particular example, the narrative ended up being rather large, and the investigator asks CoPilot to shorten it, in this case to 400 words, and CoPilot gets to work. So throughout this process, the investigator has been in full control, but CoPilot has helped them make informed and smarter decisions on how to deal with risk. I hope that gives you some idea of just how much of a step change AI can drive in the investigation process, and particularly the benefits of generative AI. As I said earlier, we're still very early days with this technology. We announced it a few weeks ago, but we want to give you a feeling for where the industry is heading, and we're looking forward to developing this further in H2, working with our partners from a technology and also the industry. Now, with that said, I'd like to thank you for your attention and open the floor for any questions. And I don't know if you're able to maybe feed any questions back from the chat message.
Thank you. Firstly, thank you for your presentation, Mr. Mark. So as of now, I don't see any questions from the audience. So I would definitely connect with you at a personal level if we receive the questions, maybe at the end of the day.
Yes, well, I'll be at the conference for the full 2 days, so we can take any questions then.
Thank you so much. So, so we would definitely have interesting sessions lined up. I request you to kindly stay on the platform itself so that we can have an interesting discussion going forward. Right. Thank you for your insights, and we would definitely look forward for future initiatives like this.
Anil, sorry, I just saw a question pop up on the screen there. I didn't quite catch it. Can you see it from your end?
Okay, it's Shamin thanking you for the insights into AMI and AI in AML, and she also wants to know how readily available is this AI technology now for various sized banks.
That's a good question. So as I mentioned, I think it's a very rapidly evolving space. The earlier 3 use cases around rule tuning, detection, and alert prioritization, we have capabilities there that could be used in a production environment right now. So those models are available, and we have approaches that will work with customers to deploy those into operational environments. The generative AI piece that I showed towards the end, that is very recent. We have announced it externally a few weeks ago, and we do have a genuine product there. What we'll be doing is working with partners, both from a technology perspective, but also from the industry, because what we really want to do is hone the model tuning process, training process, and work with investigators in AML teams to really ensure that that digital assistant is supporting their work as effectively as possible. So thank you for the question.
Great. All right, I think we don't have any further questions as of now. As I mentioned, I'll definitely connect with you at the end of the day to just know what are the questions that we've received from the audience.
Perfect.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mark. Have a nice day.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Every day, financial crime investigators face thousands of alerts warning them of suspicious activity. But it can take hours to understand how much risk each alert actually poses. With Sensa CoPilot from SymphonyAI, your team can investigate and resolve alerts faster and more accurately. A first for the industry, Sensa CoPilot uses the power of generative AI to provide investigators with a smart and reliable assistant. Sensa CoPilot collects, collates, and summarizes all of the available data in an easy-to-understand narrative. Consistent, fast, trusted, intuitive, and future-ready, Sensa CoPilot does the legwork, so that investigators can focus on what they do best, making informed and smarter decisions about how to deal with risk. Allowing your organization to counter bad actors quickly. CoPilot, your AI investigative assistant.